11. Melosa, not Melosa. Slow down, yelled Sibongile, looking at her sister in alarm. There were too many trucks along the road for one to go speeding like that. And at night, on the ML, it's really advisable to take it easy while driving. Sorry, muttered Julia, easing her foot off the accelerator pedal. She wished Dan was around. He was a steady driver. Rock steady at everything. Maybe that's why he had chosen the medical profession. Outwardly though, there was nothing about Dan which could associate him with his profession. He was so simple that he could be anything, anybody. What are you doing, Dan, or are you missing me? Sorry Dan, but the past is catching up fast with me. There's no beating it. Remember, Dan, when you came to college that day, we had the band from Lusaka. Remember what I said? I said you had proved me wrong, for I had always confided in my friends that I would never fall in love with any man. You proved me wrong. So special you are, Dan. But will you remain special when you find out about the family secret? She stepped on the pedal again. Melosa suddenly seemed to be far, far away. Her mind wandered to Tendehai. What are you doing, Tendehai, or are you feeling lonely? Isn't it cold out there? Are they being nice to you, my dear? I mean the policemen, are they? Have they offered you a steaming cup of coffee with a piece of cake? Sibongile, too, was thinking about Tendehai, imagining her sitting curled in a coma like a chicken caught in the rain. What brought you to Melosa, Tendehai? At the back of her mind she had the uneasy feeling that somehow Alphonse was involved in all this. Maybe he had kidnapped the girl at knife point and the car he had been in had run out of fuel in Melosa, or maybe the car had slowed down and Tendehai had jumped out through the window. They were just past the university town, Zomba, when Sibongile heard the siren from behind them. It was neither an ambulance's nor a fire truck's. Police. Slow down. What? Julia said, startled. Then from behind them a car flicked its headlights on and off in rapid succession in the manner of a child playing with a torch. We've to stop, said Sibongile. No, said Julia, sure that the siren wasn't meant for them. I haven't been speeding that much, she thought. The next moment, a police car whizzed past them and in no time, it disappeared into the darkness. For a moment, I thought. Began Sibongile but didn't finish what she wanted to say because Julia wasn't listening. As they approached Domesai, they noticed that the traffic ahead of them was slowing down. Then it came to standstill. There were about 6 or so vehicles that had stopped. There must be an accident, muttered Sibongile, her mind sickening her with an imaginary scene which had Tendehai lying down after being run over by a car, her little body. Sibongile shut her eyes quickly as if to wash away the ugly picture from her mind. Then the vehicle started moving, slowly, as if there was a huge do not overtake truck ahead of them. When there were about 2 cars up front, Julia had the opportunity to see what was holding them up. Roadblock, she said under her breath. Routine check perhaps, mumbled Sibongile, imagining the police discovering Tendehai's battered body in the boot of a car. When the Datsun coupe came to the roadblock, a policeman flashed a powerful torchlight at the number plate. Out, he roared suddenly, jerking the driver's door open. The ladies pretended not to have heard him. Julia suddenly noticed that there were 2 other policemen around. Holding the driver's door with one hand, the policeman signaled with the other to the other cars behind the Datsun to go past. Got you, the man muttered excitedly, only to grimace when he realized the driver was a lady and so was her passenger. Women, he called to his colleagues, his voice clearly disappointed. Don't take chances, one of the men bellowed. Confirm. The man at the door leaned forward and touched Julia where it mattered. She reacted by slapping him hard on the forearm. Confirmed, officer, he announced, smarting from the slap. The other 2 men quickly came forward and ordered the ladies to get out. The keys, demanded the man at the door. He walked to the boot of the Datsun and flung it open. A quick inspection revealed there was nothing of interest there. He checked under the seats and in the dashboard. Nothing. Finally, he pulled the bonnet open. Nothing, except for the engine, of course. Turning to Julia, a notebook now in his hand, torchlight on it, the man said, "Your name?" "Mrs. Moyo." "Nationality?" "Malawian." "Is this your car?" "Yes." "My husband's." "Where is he?" "Attending a workshop in Mangochi." "Why were you driving so fast?" "Sorry, sir. Why didn't you stop when we signaled to you?" "Sorry, sir. Julia did not want to ask, "How do you tell the police want you to stop at night, that is? You have a license?" "Yes, sir." The other policeman said probably it would be in order if they took the ladies to the nearest police station. The driver had to be charged formally, reckless driving and contempt of law. "Excuse me, gentlemen," began Sibongile and explained why they were in a hurry to get to Malosa. "You expect us to believe that," said one of the policemen in a voice that clearly showed he didn't believe a word she was saying. "Anyway, could the Datsun follow them to the police station, which was only a few kilometers away?" "Okay." "Fine," Julia nodded, relieved that they weren't going to snatch the keys from her and impound the car. Every minute was important. The longer they delayed, the more miserable Tendehai would become. Poor girl, what was she doing now? Sleeping. Malosa isn't far away from Domesai, and a few minutes later the lawman's car entered the police gates, the Datsun following suit. "You wait in here," one of the policemen said to the ladies before going up the steps into the police building. He was back within moments. He said something to his two colleagues in the police car and they came out almost immediately to where the Datsun was. "Out," one of them said, his voice icy. What had gone wrong? Julia couldn't help wondering. They were led into a room which had a tall desk extending from one corner to the other. On the wall behind it were several wanted faces and a faded calendar. Also hanging on the wall were a couple of overused handcuffs and one or two caps. Standing stiffly behind the desk were two constables who looked as alike as if they were brothers, the difference being that one was shorter. They were both light-skinned and had very low foreheads. One of the men who had been in the police car said to them, "Pass me the statement sheets." "Yes, officer," the taller one said and gave the officer a quick salute before taking out several green sheets of paper from the desk. Turning to the ladies, the officer said, "Before we turn to anything else, I would like to ask whether you are ready to make a statement." "Statement?" Sibongile asked blankly. Sit down, sit down." The officer gestured to them to sit on a long form near the door. "To start with, I want a voluntary statement from you," he said, pointing at Julia, who was staring at him as if wondering why there was all that fuss. He was a man of medium height and had bulging cheeks. "What statement?" Julia asked. "You were driving recklessly along the ML tonight, weren't you?" "Good God. I'm not forcing you to say anything, mind you," the officer said. "You can keep quiet until you call a lawyer tomorrow. But we won't let you go, though." "Good God. Where was Tendehai? Or do you want me to write the statement on your behalf and then you can sign it?" "Fine, go ahead." Julia nodded. She wasn't bothered about the statement. It would mean a fine or a few kwaches, but she was bothered about Tendehai. Where was she? "Where's my sister, gentlemen?" she asked the two constables behind the desk. "Wait, madam," the shorter one said, his eyes on the officer writing the statement. Obviously, he was fascinated by the speed the officer was displaying as he wrote the statement. After a few minutes, the officer looked up and shoved the statement to Julia. "Read it and if you're satisfied it's all right, sign it." "Fine, sir," Julia said, and taking the pen from him, she signed the form without bothering to read it. She pushed it back to him. "Now, where's Tendehai, our sister?" she asked. "That is the next item I was coming to," said the officer. "Why are you fabricating stories?" "What do you mean, sir?" "You told me a story about your younger sister being here," the officer said with a frown. "Yes, sir," replied Julia, puzzled. "Well, she's not here." "Tendehai is not here?" Sibongile ejaculated, her eyes popping. The sound of the strong emotions in her voice surprised the men in the room, for if she was acting then she was probably the best actress in the world. There was something about these ladies that had made the officer in the first place believe the story about Tendahai being at Malosa police station. And now, even though the constables on duty had said they weren't aware of any young girl being there, still he hesitated to rule out the lady's story. He had been around long enough to tell phony feelings from real ones. Unless he was making a mistake, the feelings these women were displaying were genuine enough. Would Perry Mason call it the case of the missing sister? He thought fleetingly. The next moment he had a brainwave. Oh. Well, you said your young sister rang you. Yes, sir, replied Julia. Was the line faint? No, sir. Did she say Malosa or Molosa? He asked, holding down his excitement. He was sure he could figure out what had happened. Julia's eyes narrowed. She appeared confused for a moment. Yes, what was it Tendahai had said, Malosa or Molosa? Could she bet on it? I think she said Malosa, she replied finally. Are you sure? No. Yes. Could she have said Molosa? The officer went on. She could have, I suppose. So you are not sure whether she said Malosa or Molosa? I can't be sure. She muttered. She had never heard of a place called Malosa. She had heard of Malosa. After all, there is a very good secondary school there plus a school for nurses and then there is an Anglican establishment. But Molosa? No, she had never heard of that. The officer turned to the constables behind the desk and ordered them to get in touch with the police post at Molosa. Within moments, the jigsaw fell into place. The policeman at Molosa confirmed the presence of a girl answering to the name Tendahai. Thank God, breathed Sibongile, a relieved smile on her lips. She looked thankfully at the officer who responded with a brief twitch at a corner of his mouth. Molosa is just a small post a few kilometers from Limba, the senior policeman said. A few minutes afterwards, the Datsun coupe was speeding towards Limba, its driver ignoring the officer's advice that she should take it easy for it was better to reach Molosa safely rather than never. The trip back was much shorter. The two sisters hardly said anything to each other for they had mutual respect for each other's world of privacy. But their thoughts had one focal point, Tendahai. They were stopped twice by the police, but the moment the men realized the driver was a woman, they did not hesitate to let the Datsun go. So, a couple of hours later, Julia pulled up outside Molosa police post and the two women walked into a room where they found a sergeant sitting on a stool behind a high desk. He was listening to some rumba music on a cassette player. The moment the ladies walked in, he switched it off. In her mind's eye, Sibongile could see several handcuffs, a loaded gun, a club, a whistle, an alarm button, behind the high desk. She thought she could see several policemen hiding there, ready to spring into action if anybody decided to play tough in the room. She shuddered. The sergeant whipped out sheets of green paper and Julia almost groaned aloud at the sight of them, not another statement. Good God! Can I have your names, addresses? Yes, sir. After the names had been given, there came a tirade of questions. When did they first notice that Tendahai wasn't home? Did they report to the nearest police station? Why not? Did they check with her school friends? Was she in the habit of spending nights away from home with friends? Where did she go to school? How old was she? Did they feel she was too big for her age? Did she have a liking for elderly men? How much money did she get from her sisters, daily, monthly? On and on went the chain of questions, draining the patience out of Julia until her answers became shorter and shorter. Realizing that he wouldn't get much further, the sergeant finally pushed the statements to the ladies. Read them over. Make corrections if necessary. Then sign. Without reading them, Julia and Sibongile scribbled their signatures and shoved the sheets of paper back. Come with me, the man said, and they walked into a smaller room which was next door, labeled Sergeant. There were 2 pairs of handcuffs dangling from the walls and a board on which were pinned a row of wanted faces and some newspaper cuttings. The small desk in the center of the room was very tidy, as if it had never been used. On the floor just near the desk lay Tendahai, sleeping. One blanket had been spread on the floor and the other she had used to wrap herself in. Tendahai, cried Julia and quickly knelt by the girl's side. She shook her frantically as if to make sure she was alive. Tendahai. The girl opened her eyes slowly, then her eyes widened as if in disbelief when they looked into Julia's. Sis, she muttered, trying to sit up. Tendahai, breathed Julia again, pressing the girl close to her. Sibongile came and helped Tendahai to her feet. But Julia was crying, so was the girl. Julia. Sibongile's tone was disapproving. She obviously didn't encourage such a display of emotions. Sorry, Sibo. Tendahai is not a kid. I know, Sibo. The sergeant shrugged noncommittally as if he'd been watching a football game between teams he didn't care much about.